The next ones are talking about coterminal angles. When they talk about a coterminal angle, they're talking about an angle with the same degree measure. If I just happen to do 45 degrees, if I wanted a coterminal angle with 45 degrees, I could go backwards around. And so if I took the full circle, 360, and subtracted the 45, negative 315 degrees is the same thing as a positive 45 degrees. I'd end up in the same spot. And so those angles would be called coterminal because they end up in the same spot. If I start with a positive measure, I'm going to subtract 360 from that to find the negative measure. If I start with a negative measure, I'm going to add that. So I'm either going to add or subtract 360 degrees, which in radian measures is 2 pi. And so if I'm finding an angle that's coterminal with 2 pi, I'm going to take 2 pi and I'm going to subtract 11 pi over 6. Now if you kind of ignore the pi's, you're really just subtracting fractions. So I'm taking 2 minus 11/6. If I make my common denominators then, I would have 12 pi over 6, which is the same thing as 2 pi, minus 11 pi over 6, which is pi over 6. So what it's saying is, if pi over 6 is here, if I go the positive direction, that if I went negative 11 pi over 6, that I end up on the same line. That makes sense, right? I would end up in the same spot. So if I'm finding the angle between 0 and 360 that's coterminal with 495, what that's saying is I went around one whole time, but then I went around some more. Where do I end up? So I'm going to take the 495 and subtract the 360. Went around once. 495 minus 360 is 135. So I end up over here. And so 495 degrees going once all the way around plus a little bit more would land you at 135 degrees. So those are coterminal. They end up landing in the same spot if I keep going around. So if I'm going to find an angle between 0 and 360 that's coterminal with 1030, it's kind of like this one. I'm going to start with my 1030 and subtract 360. That means I'm going to go around my circle one time. 1030 minus 360 gives me 670. Now I'm at 670, I'm not between 0 and 360, which means I'm going to go around a second time. So I'm going to subtract another 360. Now I get 310, which is between my 0 and 360. So I end up somewhere over here because I didn't quite make it around another time, right? I have 50 degrees left, so I probably have just a little bit farther that I went. But that one I ended up going twice and then 310 more degrees. So if I want to find the angle between 0 and 2 pi that's coterminal with 27 pi over 10, it's kind of like this one here where I had 1030. I have to subtract 360 once around, subtract 360 until I get between what I want to be. Since I'm in radian measures, 360 is 2 pi. So I'm going to take 27 pi over 10 and subtract 2 pi until I end up with something that's between 0 and 2 pi. In this case, again, I have to find my common denominator. So 27 pi over 10 minus 20 pi over 10, because 10 times 2 is 20. 20 tenths is the same thing as 2. So when I subtract, I get 7 pi over 10. And number 18, if I move my board up here. Number 18, we want to find the angle between 0 and 2 pi that is coterminal with negative 5 pi over 2. So if it's negative, we're going to start with the 2 pi and subtract our 5 pi over 2, and we're going to keep going until we get a positive number because we're going backwards around our circle. And so here my common denominator would be 2. I'd have to have 4 pi over 2 minus 5 pi over 2. When I subtract that, I still get a negative pi over 2. So I end up having to repeat that process. I didn't leave myself much writing room, but I have to take 2 pi minus pi over 2 then. So 2 pi is 4 pi over 2 minus pi over 2 gives me 3 pi over 2. And the last one, we're starting with a positive angle, 601. I went around my circle once and then I'm going to go some more. So I'm just going to take my 601, subtract my 360. Make sure I clear my calculator first. I get 241 degrees. So, again, if you're starting with a positive number, you're subtracting 360 or 2 pi. If you're starting with a negative one, you're going to start with the 2 pi or the 360 and subtract your angle and keep going till you get that positive number.